Her hands trembled as she stared at the payment terminal. Declined. The word flashed red, merciless, while the waiter's smile froze into something colder. Emily felt every eye in that crowded restaurant burning into her back. She was 27 years old, sitting across from a man she barely knew, and her bank account had just announced to the world that she was broke. The tears came before she could stop them. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I can't afford this date." Jack said nothing. He simply reached for his wallet. But what he did next wasn't about money at all. It was about a truth that would shatter everything Emily believed about love, about worth, about what it truly means to be rich. And it all started with 3 words she never expected to hear. 3 weeks earlier, Emily had almost deleted the dating app. She was sitting in her tiny studio apartment, the kind with a kitchen so small you could touch the stove and the refrigerator at the same time, scrolling through profiles that all looked the same. Men holding fish they had caught, men flexing in gym mirrors, men standing next to cars that probably were not theirs. She had been on this app for 6 months, gone on exactly 4 dates, and each one had ended with the same hollow feeling in her chest. Not disappointment exactly, more like confirmation that she was looking for something that did not exist. Her coffee had gone cold on the nightstand, and the rain outside her window matched the grayness she felt inside. Her thumb hovered over the delete button when his profile appeared. Jack, 34, 2 daughters. The photo showed him at what looked like a school play, crouched down between 2 little girls in matching butterfly costumes, all 3 of them laughing at something off camera. His bio was simple: trying to raise 2 good humans, looking for someone real. No fish, no gym mirrors, no borrowed cars. Just a man who looked like he had been through something and come out the other side still believing in the possibility of happiness. There was something in his eyes that caught her attention, a mixture of weariness and hope that she recognized because she saw it every morning in her own mirror. Emily worked at Rosewood Bakery on 5th Street, the kind of place that smelled like vanilla and fresh bread and woke the neighborhood up at 4 in the morning. She had been there for 3 years now, starting as a cashier and working her way up to assistant manager, which meant she made $11.50 an hour instead of $9. Her days started before dawn, mixing dough and frosting cupcakes and smiling at customers who never remembered her name. She loved the work itself, the way flour felt between her fingers, the satisfaction of pulling a perfect loaf from the oven, the simple joy of creating something beautiful out of basic ingredients. What she did not love was the math that kept her awake at night. Rent was due in 12 days. Her brother's tuition payment was due in 8. Her car needed new brakes. Her winter coat had a tear she kept meaning to fix, and her bank account currently held exactly $217. She messaged Jack anyway. Something about those butterfly costumes made her brave. Something about the way he looked at his daughters made her believe that maybe, just maybe, there were still good men left in the world. They talked for 2 weeks before meeting. Not the surface-level conversations she was used to, the ones about favorite movies and dream vacations that led nowhere and meant nothing. Real conversations that stretched past midnight and picked up again before sunrise. Jack told her about his wife, how she had left when Lily was 3 and Sophie was still in diapers. Just walked out one morning and never came back. No note, no explanation, no forwarding address. He told her about the months of confusion, the sleepless nights, the way his daughters had cried for their mother until they forgot what they were crying for. He told her about the startup he was trying to build, a small software company that helped local restaurants manage their inventory. It was not making money yet. Most months, it cost him more than it brought in. But he believed in it, the way you believe in something that has to work because the alternative is unthinkable. Emily told him things she had never told anyone, about her father, who had died when she was 19, and left behind nothing but debt and a younger brother who needed someone to step up. About the funeral they could not afford, the casket they had bought on credit, the way her mother had aged 10 years in a single week. About her mother, who worked 2 jobs and still could not make ends meet, so Emily had dropped out of college to help. She had been studying culinary arts, dreaming of opening her own restaurant someday. That dream felt like a lifetime ago now, about the guilt that lived in her chest like a second heartbeat, the constant fear that she was not doing enough, would never do enough, to make up for all the ways life had failed the people she loved. "You're not responsible for fixing everything," Jack wrote one night, 3 dots appearing and disappearing for a long time before the message finally came through. Sometimes surviving is enough. Sometimes just showing up day after day is the bravest thing anyone can do. Emily read those words 6 times, each time feeling something shift inside her chest. Then she asked him to dinner. The restaurant was Jack's choice. La Fontaine, a French place downtown with white tablecloths and candles, and prices that made Emily's stomach drop the moment she opened the menu. She should have suggested somewhere else: a coffee shop, a food truck, a park bench with sandwiches from the deli down the street. Anywhere that would not require her to pretend she was someone she was not. But Jack had seemed so excited when he mentioned it, said he had been saving up for something special, and she did not have the heart to tell him that special was not something she could afford. Besides, there was a part of her, a small, foolish, hopeful part, that wanted to feel like a normal woman on a normal date, just once. She wore a dress she had found at a thrift store 3 years ago, navy blue with small white flowers that she had always thought made her look elegant. She spent 20 minutes on her hair and another 10 on makeup she rarely used. When she looked in the mirror before leaving, she almost convinced herself that she belonged in a place like La Fontaine. She ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, a salad that cost $22 and came with portions designed for someone who had never experienced actual hunger. Jack ordered pasta. They talked about his daughters, how Lily had just lost her first tooth, and was convinced the tooth fairy was her grandmother in disguise. How Sophie was learning to read and insisted on practicing with every sign they passed on the street, sounding out letters with the fierce concentration of a tiny scholar. They talked about her brother, how he was doing well in school, how she was so proud of him even though she could not always show it, how she sometimes drove past his college just to see the building where her dreams had become his. They talked about dreams and fears and all the things that feel too big to say out loud until suddenly you are saying them to someone whose eyes look at you like you are worth listening to. Jack had a way of leaning in when she spoke, his full attention focused on her face, that made Emily feel like the only person in the restaurant, like the only person in the world. Emily forgot about the money. For 2 hours, she forgot about everything except the way Jack's voice sounded when he laughed, deep and genuine and slightly surprised, as if he had not expected to find anything funny ever again. The way his hands moved when he told a story, painting pictures in the air. The way he actually listened when she spoke instead of just waiting for his turn to talk. She forgot that she was a 27-year-old woman who could not afford a $22 salad, that her rent was due in 12 days, that she had exactly $43 left after paying for the dress she was wearing and the lipstick she had bought in a moment of foolish optimism. She forgot until the waiter brought the check. Jack reached for it automatically, but Emily's hand shot out to stop him. "Let me get mine," she said, the words coming out before she could think them through. It was pride, mostly, a desperate need to prove that she was not the kind of woman who expected men to pay for everything, that she could take care of herself, that she was not a charity case. She had been taking care of herself and everyone else for so long that accepting help felt like failure. Jack looked at her for a long moment, something flickering in his eyes that she could not quite read. Concern, maybe, or recognition. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." She wasn't sure. She was the opposite of sure. But she pulled out her card anyway, the one she had been saving for emergencies, the one that was supposed to have enough on it for this exact situation. She had checked her balance that morning. There was enough. There had to be enough. The waiter took both cards with a practiced smile. Emily watched him walk away, her heart pounding in her chest like it was trying to escape. She told herself it would be fine. She had calculated everything. There was enough. The waiter came back. He leaned down, his voice low enough that only Emily could hear, but somehow loud enough to fill the entire restaurant. "I'm sorry, ma'am. This card has been declined." The world stopped. Emily felt the blood drain from her face, felt her hands go cold and numb, felt every conversation in that crowded restaurant fade into a distant hum. Declined. The word echoed in her head like a gunshot. She had forgotten about the automatic payment for her phone bill. $67 withdrawn that morning, leaving her with -24. How could she have forgotten? How could she have been so stupid? She was sitting in a restaurant she could not afford, wearing a dress she could not afford, pretending to be someone she could not afford to be. And now everyone knew it. The couple at the next table had stopped talking. The waiter's smile had frozen into something that looked almost like pity. She could feel the judgment pressing against her skin like a physical weight. The tears came before she could stop them. Hot, humiliating tears that rolled down her cheeks and dripped onto the white tablecloth, leaving small, dark spots on the pristine fabric. She could feel people staring, could feel their judgment, their pity, their relief that they were not her. She wanted to disappear. She wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. She wanted to be anywhere but here, in this moment, in this failure. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking on every syllable. "I can't afford this date." Jack said nothing. He simply reached for his wallet, pulled out enough cash to cover the entire bill, plus a generous tip, and handed it to the waiter, without counting it. Then he did something Emily did not expect, something that would change everything. He stood up, walked around to her side of the table, and knelt down beside her chair. Right there, in the middle of La Fontaine, with its white tablecloths and its crystal chandeliers and its judgmental silence, he knelt down on the hardwood floor and took her hands in his. She could feel the calluses on his palms, the roughness of hands that knew hard work. His eyes met hers, steady and unashamed. "Emily," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "Look at me." She could not look at him, could not bear to see the disappointment, the pity, the realization that he had wasted his evening on a woman who could not even pay for her own salad. She stared at their joined hands instead, watching her tears fall onto his fingers. "Please," he said, "look at me." Look, she looked. And what she saw in his eyes was not disappointment. It was not pity. It was not the look of a man who regretted his choices. It was something that looked almost like recognition, like he was seeing her, really seeing her, for the first time. Like he understood something she had been trying to hide her entire life. 3 months ago, he said, I had to call my mother and ask her for money. $200 so I could buy groceries for my girls. Lily needed new shoes for school. Sophie had a doctor's appointment I couldn't reschedule. The company had just lost its biggest client, and I had already maxed out my credit cards trying to keep things running. I had exactly $11 in my checking account. He paused, his thumb tracing small circles on the back of her hand. I sat in my car for 20 minutes before I could make that call. I was 34 years old, a father of 2, supposed to be the provider, the protector, the man with all the answers. And I had to ask my mother to help me feed my children. Emily stared at him, the tears still wet on her cheeks, but no longer falling. The restaurant around them had gone silent, but she barely noticed. "You know what she said," Jack continued. "She said, 'Jack, being broke doesn't make you broken. It just makes you human.' And then she transferred the money and told me she loved me and asked me what Lily wanted for her birthday." He squeezed her hands, his eyes never leaving hers. "She didn't judge me. She didn't make me feel small. She just helped, because that's what people who love you do." He reached up and wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "You have nothing to be sorry for. Nothing. You work hard. You take care of your family. You gave up your own dreams so your brother could have his. You show up every single day and do your best, even when your best doesn't feel like enough. That's not something to be ashamed of. That's something to be proud of." Emily felt something shift inside her chest. A wall she had been building for years, brick by brick, starting to crack. She had spent so long trying to hide her struggles, trying to pretend she had everything under control. And here was this man, kneeling on a restaurant floor, telling her that he understood, that he had been there, that she wasn't alone. "But I can't even," she started. "You can't even what?" Jack interrupted gently. "Afford a restaurant that charges $22 for a salad? Neither can I. Not really. I saved for 3 months for tonight. 3 months of packing lunches and skipping coffee and telling myself that I would find someone worth spending it on." He smiled, and it was the most genuine smile she had ever seen, bright and warm and full of something that looked like hope. "I found her." Around them, the restaurant had gone completely silent. Not the cruel silence of judgment, but something softer. Something that felt almost like listening. Emily noticed the woman at the next table dabbing at her eyes with her napkin, an older man nodding slowly, as if remembering something from his own past. "I don't need you to be rich," Jack said. "I need you to be real. And you just showed me the realest thing I've seen in a very long time." They left La Fontaine hand in hand, walking out past the tables of strangers, who suddenly did not seem so strange anymore. The older woman reached out and touched Emily's arm as they passed, a brief gesture of solidarity that said more than words could. A young couple exchanged glances that spoke of their own struggles, their own hidden fears. The waiter held the door open for them, and Emily could have sworn she saw tears in his eyes. Outside, the night air was cool and clean, and Emily took a deep breath that felt like the first real breath she had taken in hours. The city sparkled around them, lights reflecting off wet pavement from an earlier rain, and for a moment, everything felt possible. Jack drove her home in his 10-year-old Honda, the one with the car seats in the back and the crayon marks on the ceiling and the mysterious stain on the passenger seat that he could never quite explain. There were goldfish crackers scattered on the floor and a stuffed elephant wedged between the seats. It was the most beautiful car Emily had ever been in. They did not talk much during the drive. They did not need to. Something had passed between them in that restaurant, something that words would only diminish. Jack's hand found hers in the darkness between their seats, and they drove through the city in comfortable silence. At her apartment door, Emily turned to face him. The hallway light was dim, flickering slightly, and she could hear her neighbor's television through the thin walls. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "Dating, I mean. Being with someone. I've spent so long taking care of everyone else that I forgot how to let someone take care of me. I don't have anything to offer." Jack reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was gentle, careful, like she was something precious. "You have yourself. That's everything." He kissed her then, soft and brief and full of promise. And Emily felt, for the first time in longer than she could remember, like she might be enough. The weeks that followed were nothing like Emily had imagined. There were no fancy dinners, no expensive gifts, No attempts to pretend they were anything other than two people trying to build something real on a foundation of almost nothing. Their dates were picnics in the park, sandwiches made from whatever was on sale at the grocery store, eaten on a blanket that had seen better days. They were free museum days on the first Sunday of every month, wandering through exhibits while Lily complained that everything was boring, and Sophie asked 100 questions about everything they saw. They were movie nights on Jack's worn-out couch, the girls falling asleep between them, while some animated film played for the 15th time, their small bodies warm and trusting. Emily met Lily and Sophie on their third date, 2 weeks after the restaurant incident. Jack had warned her that they might be shy, that they did not always take to new people right away, that she should not take it personally if they kept their distance. His ex's departure had left scars that were still healing. Lily was 6, all sharp edges and suspicious eyes. She looked at Emily the way a detective looks at a suspect, searching for evidence of something that would prove she could not be trusted. She had her father's stubborn jaw and her own particular way of standing with her arms crossed, like she was ready for disappointment. Sophie was 4, the opposite of her sister in every way, open and curious and ready to love anyone who would let her. She had curly hair that refused to stay in pigtails and a gap-toothed smile that could light up a room. "Are you Daddy's girlfriend?" Sophie asked within 5 minutes of meeting her, the question delivered with the blunt honesty that only a 4-year-old can muster. Emily looked at Jack, who was doing a terrible job of hiding his embarrassment. "I think so," she said. "If that's okay with you." Sophie considered this for a moment, her face scrunched up in concentration. "Do you like pancakes?" "I love pancakes." "Then it's okay." And just like that, Emily had been accepted. Lily took longer. She kept her distance for weeks, answering Emily's questions with one-word responses, refusing to engage with any of her attempts at conversation. Emily did not push. She understood, in a way that surprised her, what it meant to be a child who had been abandoned by someone they trusted. How hard it was to let anyone new get close when the last person you had trusted had simply walked away without looking back. The breakthrough came on a rainy Sunday afternoon. Jack was in the kitchen, trying to fix a pipe that had been leaking for months, his muttered curses drifting through the house. Sophie was napping on the couch, her thumb in her mouth, and Emily was sitting on the floor of the living room, teaching herself to braid friendship bracelets from a YouTube tutorial on her phone. Lily appeared in the doorway, watching silently for several minutes. Emily pretended not to notice, keeping her focus on the colorful threads in her hands. Then, without a word, Lily sat down next to her and picked up a strand of thread. "Can you teach me?" she asked, her voice so quiet Emily almost did not hear it. "Of course," Emily said, fighting to keep the emotion out of her voice. "Let me show you." They sat there for 2 hours, side by side, making bracelets that were lumpy and uneven and absolutely perfect. They talked about school and friends and favorite colors. Lily asked about the bakery, whether Emily ever got to eat the cookies. Emily told her about the secret ingredient she put in the chocolate chip cookies, a tiny bit of espresso powder, and Lily promised not to tell anyone. When Jack came to check on them, covered in pipe grease and looking exhausted, Lily held up her wrist to show him what she had made. "Emily helped me," she said. And for the first time since they had met, she smiled at Emily. A real smile, full of trust and acceptance. "Can she come back tomorrow?" Jack looked at Emily, and she could see everything he felt written on his face. Gratitude, hope, love. "I think she can," he said. But even happiness has its shadows. As the months passed, Emily found herself increasingly haunted by a feeling she could not name. It crept up on her in quiet moments. When Jack bought the girls new backpacks for school without thinking twice about the cost. When they went out for ice cream and he paid without a second thought. When she overheard Lily telling a friend, about all the presents her daddy's old girlfriend used to bring her. She started doing the math in her head, calculating how much she was not contributing, measuring herself against a woman she had never met, but who somehow seemed to be winning a competition Emily did not remember entering. The old girlfriend had money. The old girlfriend had brought gifts. The old girlfriend had not been someone who cried in restaurants because her card was declined. Emily began pulling away, small distances at first, declining invitations to family dinners, making excuses about needing to work extra shifts, filling her schedule with overtime at the bakery. She told herself it was for the money. She told herself she needed to be responsible. She told herself the girls needed expensive things she could not provide. But the truth was simpler and uglier. She was terrified of not being enough. Jack noticed. Of course he noticed. He knew her too well by now. But every time he tried to talk about it, Emily deflected. She was fine. Everything was fine. She was just tired, just busy, just dealing with some things at work. What she did not know was that Jack was hiding something too. The startup was failing. Not slowly, the way businesses usually fail, but catastrophically, like a building collapsing from the inside. His biggest client had pulled out without warning, taking 3 other clients with them. His savings were gone. The loan he had taken out to keep things running was coming due, and the numbers did not add up no matter how many times he ran them. He was 3 months behind on his mortgage. He had been eating 1 meal a day to make sure the girls had enough. He did not tell Emily because he could not bear to see her face when she realized she had chosen another failure. He did not tell her because he was supposed to be the strong one, the provider, the man who had everything under control. He did not tell her because the shame of it was so heavy he could barely breathe under its weight. So they both kept their secrets. And the distance between them grew. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening, 3 days before Christmas. Emily had not seen Jack in over a week. She had been avoiding his calls, responding to his texts with single-word answers, building walls she did not know how to tear down. She was closing up the bakery when she caught her reflection in the darkened window. She looked tired. She looked afraid. She looked like someone who was about to lose the best thing that had ever happened to her because she was too scared to fight for it. And suddenly, she was angry. Not at Jack, not at the world, but at herself. At the voice in her head that kept telling her she was not enough. At the fear that had controlled her for so long. She thought of Lily, who had finally learned to trust her. Of Sophie, who called her every night to tell her about her day. Of Jack, who had knelt on a restaurant floor and told her she had nothing to be ashamed of. She was done running. Emily untied her apron, grabbed her keys, and drove to Jack's house. She did not call ahead. She did not rehearse what she would say. She just knew that if she did not do this now, she never would. She found him sitting on the back porch, alone in the dark, staring at nothing. The Christmas lights the girls had helped him hang were dark. The yard looked abandoned. She could see the girls inside through the window, their faces pressed against the glass, watching with the worried expressions of children who understand more than adults give them credit for. Emily sat down beside him on the cold wooden step. She did not speak. She just sat there, close enough that their shoulders almost touched, waiting. "I'm losing everything," Jack finally said, his voice hollow. "The company's done. I can't pay my loans. I might lose the house." He laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that hurts to hear. "Merry Christmas, right?" Emily reached over and took his hand. His fingers were cold. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Why didn't you tell me you were pulling away because you thought you weren't good enough?" he countered. He turned to look at her, and even in the darkness, she could see the pain in his eyes. "I know you, Emily. I know when you're hiding." The words hit her like a wave. She wanted to deny it. She wanted to keep her walls up, keep her secrets safe, keep pretending that she was strong enough to handle everything alone. But she was so tired of pretending. "I don't know how to be with someone," she admitted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I don't know how to not compare myself to everyone you've been with before. I don't know how to stop feeling like I'm not enough, not pretty enough, not successful enough, not anything enough." And I thought, her voice cracked, "I thought if I pulled away first, it would hurt less when you finally realized you deserved better." Jack was quiet for a long moment. Then he squeezed her hand, hard enough that she could feel the desperation in his grip. "You want to know what I see when I look at you?" he asked. "I see a woman who gave up her dreams so her brother could have his. I see someone who works 14-hour days and still finds time to make friendship bracelets with a 6-year-old who forgot how to trust. I see the person who made my daughter smile again. I see someone who has more strength in her little finger than most people have in their whole body." He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "I don't need you to be rich, Emily. I don't need you to buy presents or pay for dinners or compete with anyone. I just need you to stay. Can you do that? Can you stay?" Emily thought about all the times she had run, from relationships, from opportunities, from anything that might require her to be vulnerable. She thought about her tiny apartment and her empty refrigerator and her bank account that never seemed to have enough. She thought about Lily's smile and Sophie's laugh and Jack's hands, rough from work but gentle when they held hers. "Yes," she whispered. "I can stay." The months that followed were not easy. Real life never is. Jack's company folded completely, but he found work at a larger tech firm, a steady job with benefits, and a salary that actually covered the bills. He had to start at the bottom, writing code instead of running things, but he did it without complaint. Emily got promoted to manager at the bakery, a raise that meant she could finally stop choosing between groceries and rent. She started teaching baking classes on weekends and found that she loved it even more than she had expected. They did not solve all their problems. They still argued about money sometimes, still had days when the weight of everything felt too heavy to carry. But they carried it together. They learned to talk instead of hide, to lean instead of pull away, to trust that the other person would still be there in the morning. They started a jar in the kitchen, the kind you collect spare change in. Every time one of them felt grateful for something, they wrote it on a slip of paper and dropped it in. Within a month, the jar was overflowing. On a warm evening in June, almost exactly a year after that disastrous dinner at La Fontaine, Jack took Emily back to the same restaurant. She protested. It was too expensive. They should save the money. There were better ways to spend it. But he insisted. They sat at the same table, ordered the same food, even had the same waiter, a young man named Roberto, who recognized them immediately and grinned like he was in on a wonderful secret. But everything else was different. Emily was different. She did not feel the need to prove anything, did not feel the weight of comparison pressing down on her chest. She was simply there, with a man she loved, eating food that tasted better than she remembered. When the check came, Jack did not reach for it. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Emily's heart stopped. "This belonged to my late wife," he said, opening the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond that caught the candlelight like a captured star. "I kept it all these years, not knowing why. And then I met you, and I understood. She would have wanted it to go to someone who loves our girls as much as she did. Someone real. Someone like you." He looked at her then, with eyes that held no secrets, no hidden fears, no walls. Just love, simple and terrifying and real. "I talked to the girls," he continued. "Lily said, and I quote, 'Finally.' Sophie asked if this means you'll make pancakes every morning." He smiled, that same genuine smile she had fallen in love with a year ago. So I guess my question is, will you make pancakes every morning? With us? Forever? Emily laughed through her tears, the same tears she had cried at this same table a year ago, but so different now. So completely different. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll make pancakes. Yes, I'll stay. Yes to all of it. Around them, the restaurant erupted in applause. Roberto was openly crying. The older woman at the next table was recording on her phone, and Emily realized that this was it. This was what it meant to be rich, not the money in your bank account, not the car you drove or the clothes you wore or the restaurants you could afford. It was this: finding someone who saw you at your worst and decided you were worth staying for anyway. Building a family from broken pieces and discovering they fit together better than you ever could have planned. Learning that love was not about being enough. It was about being willing to try over and over again, even when you failed. They got married that September. A small ceremony in Jack's backyard with 20 guests and a cake Emily had baked herself at 4 in the morning. Lily was the flower girl, scattering petals with the serious concentration of someone performing brain surgery. Sophie was the ring bearer, though she got distracted by a butterfly halfway down the aisle and had to be gently redirected by her grandmother. Emily wore a simple white dress that had cost her exactly $47 at a second-hand shop. Jack wore a suit he had borrowed from his brother. Neither of them cared. They were surrounded by people who loved them, marrying the person who had seen them at their lowest and chosen to stay anyway. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, Lily raised her hand. "I object to the kissing part," she announced. "It's gross." Everyone laughed. Jack promised to keep the kissing to a minimum. He did not keep that promise. Later, after the cake had been eaten and the guests had gone home, and the girls were asleep in their beds, Emily and Jack sat on the back porch together. The same porch where they had broken down their walls all those months ago. The same porch where they had decided to stop running and start building. Fireflies danced in the yard, and the summer air smelled like honeysuckle and possibility. "Do you ever think about that night?" Jack asked. "At La Fontaine." Emily leaned her head against his shoulder. "Sometimes. I think about how close I came to giving up, to deleting that app, to walking away, to deciding I wasn't worth loving. And now?" She was quiet for a moment, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. "Now, I think that was the best thing that ever happened to me," she said. Not the embarrassment, not the declined card, but what came after. Learning that I didn't have to be perfect to be loved, that I didn't have to have everything figured out, that sometimes the things we're most ashamed of are the things that lead us exactly where we need to be. Jack kissed the top of her head. "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think you were always worth loving. You just needed someone to remind you." Emily smiled, feeling the truth of it settle into her bones. She had spent so many years believing she was not enough, not smart enough, not successful enough, not worthy enough of the kind of love she saw in movies and read about in books. But here she was, sitting next to a man who loved her despite her flaws, or maybe because of them. Part of a family she had never expected to find, richer than she had ever been, though her bank account would never reflect it. Because in the end, that was the secret no one told you about love. It was not about finding someone who completed you. It was about finding someone who saw all the ways you were incomplete and decided to stay anyway, who held your hand through the hard parts and celebrated with you through the good, who knelt down on a restaurant floor and told you that being broke did not mean you were broken. It was about finding someone who made you believe, finally, that you were worth the risk. Emily had found that. Against all odds, against all evidence, against every voice in her head that told her she would never be enough. And it had started with 3 simple words she never expected to hear. "Look at me." She had looked, and everything had changed.